all. Bills can win it here. White puts it down. The kick is on the way, and it is good. And the Bills have won it. The Bills have won it. The Bills have won it. They win it 41-38. Incredible. What a comeback by the Bills.
Jacksonville's perfect record on the line right here.
They put in Williams as the fullback, and he scores a touchdown, the 12th year defensive tackle.
And the fans are all over the field. Incredible. This place is pandemonium.
Welcome to another episode of Disguised Coverage, a special episode of Disguised Coverage on this November 5th. I always think November 5th is pretty awesome, and it's a date and a day that I always remember. I think it's important to remember the 5th of November. I always think it's important to also remember the gunpowder treason and plot, because I personally know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. First person in the comments to tell me what movie that's from gets a gold star. And gold stars from me are equal to 20 Shroot Bucks. So pretty big value. Again, welcome to another episode of Disguised Coverage. I am Anthony, the host of Disguised Coverage. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro_ANT. Give me a follow on Twitter. I also accept interesting trades, fun negotiations, cash payments, silver, gold, any type of anything that holds any value. Follow me on the Twitter. Find Disguised Coverage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, part of the Cover One Sports Network. While you're there, like and subscribe to Disguised Coverage. Review as well. Same thing for Cover One. We are the best content creators and breakers, downers, and analyzers of the Buffalo Bills, anything and everything pertaining to the Buffalo Bills. Thank you for tuning in to this episode this week. And this episode, matchup breakdowns, the Buffalo Bills versus the Seattle Seahawks. What we're going to get into in this episode are matchup breakdowns for the Buffalo Bills and the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to get into Josh Allen versus Russell Wilson. We're going to get into the Bills defense versus the Seattle Seahawks offense. We're going to get into the Bills offense against the Seattle defense, break some matchups down, break some things down in there. This is a big matchup. The Seahawks 6-1, top in the NFC. Russell Wilson is an MVP favorite right now, a wide, large leading MVP favorite right now. And for a Bills team coming off of two quote-unquote uninspiring wins against the Jets and the Patriots, this is an awesome opportunity for the Buffalo Bills. This is a victory that they can hang their hat on going forward. The Seahawks are a very good offensive football team. I think their defense is a little better in certain areas than the numbers and the metrics and the stats indicate, but they're getting some reinforcements on that defense. We're going to go over that later in this episode. But they're a team that is led offensively by Russell Wilson and that offense. They've got some opportunities on defense that the Bills offense could take advantage of. But long story short, people, analysts, pundits, fans see this Seahawks team as a genuine Super Bowl contender. And if the Bills can knock off a Super Bowl contender, especially coming off of the quote-unquote uninspiring wins that they've had over the last couple of weeks, then that will be a nice feather in their cap. And I think it would restore a little bit of the faith in Josh Allen and into the Bills that has been lost a little bit since they lost to the Titans, since they lost to the Chiefs, and since they uninspiringly beat the Jets and then the Patriots last week. Greg Thompson, is this show about River Craycraft? I'm looking to talk about River Craycraft, why he's your favorite NFL wide receiver that you definitely knew existed. No, I'm not here to talk about him or anyone else that the San Francisco 49ers have had to call up because their team just cannot catch a break whatsoever in any shape or form. But good question, Greg. I appreciate your support here. We're going to jump right into the first topic, Josh versus Russ, Josh Allen versus Russell Wilson. As I mentioned in the lead-in, Russell Wilson right now, I don't think there's any doubt about it that he is the MVP favorite for the NFL right now. If we gave the awards to somebody right now, it's hands down Russell Wilson. The plays that he's making, the decision-making that he's showing, the accuracy, the leadership, everything. Also in that conversation through the first several weeks of the season was Josh Allen. Allen was firing on all cylinders. The Bills' offense looked great. But going into this matchup, ironically, despite the size difference, with Josh being quite large and Russ being not so much, Josh Allen is very much the David to Russell Wilson's Goliath in this matchup. And as Joe Nelson, awesome fan of the show, awesome commenter, as Joe put, Russell is the MVP. That's correct. He is the MVP right now. He's just slinging it everywhere. He's high-pointing the football on his throws. It's like he throws it straight up and it just comes straight down. Perfect accuracy. Again, decision-making, who he's beat, the leadership he shows, front runner for MVP. What I'm interested with this matchup with Josh versus Russ, as we've stated multiple times on this show, and as multiple people always hear, this is a quarterback-driven league. And for as much as there are multiple starters, multiple sides of the ball, coaches, trainers, GMs, everything, every game comes down to quarterback versus quarterback. And if the Bills win this game, this is Josh Allen beating Russell Wilson, which would be a tremendous, tremendous feather in the cap of Josh Wilson, and something, again, that he could hang his hat on and this Bills team could hang their hat on. But it's not going to be easy. And we're going to take a peek at some numbers right now. Just off of the raw metrics, the raw stats for Russell Wilson, he has the record this year for the most touchdown passes through the first 3 games in NFL history. He had 14 touchdown passes through the first 3 games of this season, which is an NFL record. He has 26 touchdowns throwing on the year, which is first in the NFL. His 26 touchdowns in his first 7 games this year is the second most touchdown passes through the first 7 games of a season in NFL history. He is third right now in passing yards per game at 307.3. He's third in the NFL in completion percentage is 71.5. He's a threat with his legs. He has no rushing touchdowns, but he has 260 rushing yards. Great decision-making, accuracy. He has thrown some picks. He does have 6 interceptions on the year, so if the Bills can get after him in the turnover category, that would be tremendous. But Russ is killing it. He is someone that will exploit the weakness of the Buffalo Bills defense, which has been the intermediate part of the field and their inability to generate sacks and pressure to a degree. It's weird. Some of the pressure metrics and statistics for the Bills defense have shown up favorably. They have one of the best pass rushing grades on Pro Football Focus. They've got a decent amount of pressures, and you would think from just looking at the statistics, the Bills are doing great up front. They're causing havoc. They're causing pressure. But when you watch the games and you look at the tape, not so much. You got quarterbacks just sitting back there with all the time in the world. We saw it last week with the Patriots. Cam had several plays and several drives where he just got to sit back and survey and look and look and look and find Jacoby Myers, just be able to sit back and do that. We cannot do that with Russ. And if we fail to contain the edge, like we have in several other games, i.e. the Titans and the Kansas City games, Russ will escape. He will set up. He will throw on the run. He will run for 20 yards. He'll do that little thing that's super annoying where he scrambles. And then just as he's about to come up short of the first down, he just sticks the ball out a couple extra yards in front of him just so he can get good spottage. He's fantastic in every way. In comparison to Josh Allen, who is having a good year in his own right, this year, fun fact, he's the only player in NFL history with 1,000 passing yards, 10 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns in the first 3 weeks of a season. He's currently 6th in passing touchdowns with 16, 11th in passing yards per game with 271.5, 13th in completion percentage. He has 4 rushing touchdowns, 227 rushing yards. Now, a couple of metrics that I want to get into that I'm going to use throughout this episode, and particularly here with Josh and Russ, are DVOA and DYAR. I like metrics. I like statistics. I'm not pure analytics and pure numbers. I think the tape tells a lot. The eye test tells a lot, but I like using the two. I like metrics and film and the eye test combined in conjunction with one another to be able to tell a whole story. And for those of you who don't know, so DVOA, defense adjusted value over average. It represents the value per play over an average player in the same game situations. DYAR, defense adjusted yards above replacement. It's the value of a player's performance compared to a replacement level player, then adjusted for situations and opponents, translated into yardage. And a nice little easy way to think of it, because you can have DVOA and DYAR for individual players, and for sides of the ball like the offense, the defense, the special teams. So DYAR basically means a player's total value. DVOA is basically the value per play, efficiency ratings, all things equal. It balances out game scripts and situational yards and scores and plays and all those things. And here it's a fun thing to look at because when you looked at the raw metrics, again, comparing Josh's passing touchdowns, completion percentage, yards per game, comparing those to Russ. Russ wins hands down. He is killing it. He's almost in a class of his own. But when you compare the DVOA and the DYAR, they're similar to each other. Russ's DYAR, he's fourth in the NFL amongst quarterbacks right now at 621. Josh is right behind him at seventh with 595. Not a big separation. For DVOA, Russ is at 22.8%. Again, value adjusted over average, which is sixth in the NFL. Allen is right behind him at seventh, again at 20.7. There is, and then, as Lone Wolf said, there's a stat for everything. There is a stat for everything. But it's fun in this regard. I like DYAR and DVOA because, again, if you're just looking at stats, it's easy to get lost in things. But these two metrics, especially DVOA, correct for some of those things. Like a 5-yard gain, this is all according to Football Outsiders, and it's right on their website. It's easy to digest. But basically, a 5-yard gain on 3rd and 4 is worth more than a 5-yard gain on 3rd and 12. So those plays, those results, they're weighted differently because they mean something different. And a touchdown pass when you're down by 5 or a touchdown pass in the red zone is a much bigger deal than a 20-yard pass when you're up by 17 in the fourth quarter, or a 20-yard pass from your own 10 when you're down by 30. It balances those things out. It takes into account game script and situational opportunities. I like that. But it's interesting to see from a raw metrics perspective, Russ is leaps and bounds ahead of Josh. But from these advanced metrics, they're close. Josh has had a very good year. And I know we've been down on Josh a little bit over the last several weeks. And I know he's gotten some flack for the Patriots game last week as well. His throwing yards, his bailing out of the pocket a little early. But I think the game script for that game, the Bills executed what they wanted to do. The Patriots were going to come out and try and limit Josh's arm. So they came out in a lot of dime defense, a lot of dollar looks. They were coming out with 6 DBs, 7 DBs at times. They were susceptible and vulnerable to the run, and that's what we saw the Bills do against the Pats. We saw the best rushing performance we've seen the entire year from Singletary and Moss. We saw time and time again the Bills lean on the run, march down the field, churn out yardage on the ground, which in my mind is always favorable to passing the ball because I think it's infinitely easier to just hike it, turn around, and hand it to a guy than hike it, drop back, read a defense, make a throw, hope the guy catches it. It's easier. There's less pieces. Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the best. Running the ball to me is favorable. I thought that was the game plan going into the Pats game, and it worked. So these advanced metrics put things into perspective for what Allen has been doing this year. And for as much as Russ is killing it, and he is, and I don't want to use these advanced metrics to say, see, Josh Allen and Russell Wilson, they're super close. They're basically the same person, because that's not true. But when you use these advanced metrics, it shows the good year that Josh is having, and it shows that he is starting to creep into that upper echelon of QB. I'm not ready to cement him there yet and say he's one of the top 10 QBs in the league. He's a perennial MVP guy. We should pick up his 5th-year option and give him $75 million a week. Not ready for that. But Russ is killing it. And when you look at the tape and look at the eye test, Russ is a far better quarterback than Josh Allen. But when you look at some of the metrics, Allen is right behind him, 1 spot behind him in DVOA and 3 spots behind him in DYAR. It's pretty cool to see that Allen's holding his own a little bit with one of the elite quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the entire NFL. And Josh versus Russ this weekend is a major storyline for me because if the Bills win this game, granted, depending on what happens in the game, but the story coming out of it will be that Josh Allen beat Russell Wilson, and that's a big deal. Lone Wolf, do you think Josh Allen is a top 10 QB? I think he's in that range. I'd put him anywhere from like 9 to 13, 14, give or take a couple spots. I'm okay with any of that. I love the progression that he's made this year. That was my biggest thing coming into this year, was seeing how Josh Allen would adjust, what the effect Stephon Diggs would have on the offense and on Allen in particular. And I like what he's done this year. I also think his ceiling is still up there and he still hasn't reached it. So if you think he's the 9th best quarterback in the league right now, I still think he has the potential to jump up into a top 5 or top 4. His ceiling is still there to go with the raw tools and ability and intangibles that he does have. So it's interesting. Russ is killing it, but in the advanced metrics, Josh is holding his own, and that's a pretty fun thing to say. Next up, the Bills defense versus the Seattle offense. We've talked about it at large throughout the week on the Twitter. When I say we, I mean myself and Cover One. Joe Nelson, you also mentioned this earlier. Buffalo matching up with the Seahawks wide receivers is not looking good. This is something I really want to dive into. That point right there, the Bills defense against the Seattle wide receivers. That's something that we are going to get into with this discussion because it is so prominent. It is so prominent in this game. Just to go over some more numbers again. Again, we went over DVOA earlier. Usually plus or minus 30 is usually the best to worst when it comes to DVOA for a unit. Positive numbers are better for an offense. Negative numbers are better for a defense. So a defense that's at negative 30 DVOA is crushing it. An offense that's at positive 30 DVOA is also crushing it, just on the other side of the ball. The Seattle Seahawks, we're going to start with their offense first because I believe in knowing thy enemy. The Seahawks offense currently is third in offensive DVOA right now at 22.7%. The Chiefs are at first at 24.6. So they're less than 2 percentage points behind the Chiefs, who, as we all know, are a fantastic offense. They are first in the NFL with 34.3 points per game. They are first in the NFL at an 88% red zone touchdown percentage. They are first in the NFL at 6.4 yards per play. They are 12th in the NFL with 125.4 rushing yards per game. And they are third in passing yards per game, as we mentioned earlier, with Russell Wilson. They're a very good offense. They run 11 personnel 64% of the time. They run 12 personnel 31% of the time. So 60% of the time, it works every time. So majority of the time, they're in 11 or 12 personnel. So you're going to see 3 wide receivers, or you're going to see 2. And 2 of those wide receivers are DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And we're going to start with DK Metcalf. 6'4", 229 pounds. He's built like a machine, runs like a cyborg. He runs a 4.33 40-yard dash. He's 4th in the NFL right now in receiving yards with 680. He's 2nd in the NFL right now in yards per reception at 18.9. He's tied for 1st in the NFL with 7 receiving touchdowns. He's 8th in DYAR for wide receivers, 16th in DVOA for wide receivers, and he's 8th in yards per target at 11.5. We knew his strength and his size and his athleticism and his speed coming out of the NFL draft, and the talk and the reason that he fell a bit in the draft was how would he translate and transition to the NFL game? How would he look against NFL corners, NFL competition, against other players who had rival size and speed? What would he be able to do from a technique standpoint? He has impressed the hell out of me this year. His route tree has expanded. He ran a route on Sunday against the 49ers. I was watching that game pretty intently, where he got a good release off the line, sold it inside, stacked the corner a bit, sold the post, and just dropped his hips and popped back out for the hook, and then caught a dime from Russell Wilson. Great throw. But he sold such a great deep route and then a middle route and then popped it back out to the outside. Even the dig route that he scored for like that 40-yard touchdown where he broke across like the 7-yard dig, caught it across the middle, outran everybody across the field and went up the sideline. Even that route, he hits speed at the top of his route and then pops gears down within 2 steps and is across the middle of the field. He is fantastic. As Joe Nelson said, those Ole Miss wide receivers were underrated in the draft. Yes, both he and A.J. Brown have been very good in the NFL. DK's a monster. That speed, that size, that athleticism, that route tree. he worries me tremendously. And I think he worries every NFL defense or any coordinator, any coverage guy. But the reason he worries me even more so with the Bills is because the Bills defense, especially in the secondary, good technique, good play recognition. Like if we're looking at Tre'Davious White, who's one of the best corners in the NFL, he's not a burner. He's not tremendously athletic. He doesn't have great size, doesn't have great speed. He's quicker than he is fast, but he has great footwork. He has great hand technique. He has great hip fluidity. He has a great ability to mirror receivers, anticipate, and jump routes. That's fantastic. But at a certain point, sometimes raw athleticism and talent takes over. At a certain point, no matter how good your hand technique is or how good your footwork is, sometimes it doesn't matter if you're going up against a 6'4", 230-pound Terminator machine that catches everything and runs as if he's 5'10", 180 pounds, who can run a variety of routes and has expanded his game. That athleticism scares me. It scares me a lot. And it scares me even more, as you hear me turn the page again. I'm a notebook guy. Write everything down. Oh, also, fun fact, I hope those of you notice, I'm wearing my glasses again. Why? Because the Bills are 2-0. I don't care that they beat the Jets and the Pats, who people are labeling as weak teams, and they're not that great, to be fair. But the Bills are 2-0 since I've started wearing my glasses in episodes. Knock on wood. I don't have any wood, so I'm going to knock on this table that I got, which is some sort of plastic. I'm knocking on that to not break what we got going on, but I'm wearing glasses again to try and do anything I can to get the Bills this win against the Seahawks. But opposite of DK Metcalf. Metcalf is fantastic. He's emerged as one of the top receivers in the league this year. On the opposite side of him is another receiver who is playing like one of the best receivers in the league, and that's Tyler Lockett, who is 9th in the NFL in receptions with 49. He's 13th in receiving yards with 575. He's also tied for first with DK Metcalf and several other receivers with 7 receiving touchdowns. He's second in the entire NFL for wide receivers in DYAR. His defensive adjusted yards above replacement, he's second best in the entire NFL. And he's 5th in DVOA. Phenomenal. A tremendous compliment. Technically skilled, but can still get vertical. Great hands, great athleticism. I don't know how many times over the last 3 years I've seen Lockett make a catch every year where he just he goes deep and it doesn't look like he has any room to get his feet down or get his body down, and he makes a catch in the back of the end zone or the front of the end zone and just drags a knee or drags both feet. He's tremendous. They are a tremendous receiver complement to Russell Wilson, arguably the best receiver tandem in the NFL. Their numbers have been insane. Their production is insane. And it's scary because on one side, you've got DK Metcalf, who is just a physical monster in terms of speed, size, and athleticism, but who's also getting better from a technical skill standpoint in terms of his route tree and defense reading. And then on the other side, you've got someone like Tyler Lockett, who isn't the biggest guy, but is fast, is quick, is agile, and is very technically sound in his route running, in his play recognition and decision-making, his option routes, his hands, his ability to win with his body and shield the defender, despite the fact that he's a smaller receiver. What I would love to see in this Bills game is something that the New England Patriots did when Darrelle Revis was there and when Aqib Talib was there. What they did was they would take Revis or they would take Talib when they would play their man cover one schemes, and they would put Revis or Talib on the second best receiver. And then they would put their second best corner on the best receiver and then shade him over the top with a safety. I would love to see the Buffalo Bills come out and do that. I know the Pats did it with a cover one man scheme, but I would love to see the Bills do that. Put Tre'Davious White on Tyler Lockett. I think Trey matches up decently well with Lockett. No disrespect to Lockett. And then take whatever number 2 corner we're rolling out there and put Micah Hyde over the top on DK Metcalf and double him. I think that's what the Bills need to do to get this win. Otherwise, I love Trey. I love him. I love him. I love him. I don't think Trey matches up well with DK Metcalf. And I don't think that's disrespectful to Trey because I don't think any corner in the NFL matches up well with DK Metcalf. Patrick Peterson did in the game against Arizona, but Patrick Peterson is a very unique corner. He is fast. He's strong. He's big for a corner. He's tremendously athletic. He was one of the best corners in the league for a significant period of time. He matched up well with DK. I don't think we have a corner with that type of size and athleticism and speed a la a Patrick Peterson. So give me that Pats Revis, Pats Talib, cover one man scheme where you take Tre'Davious White, your best corner, put him on the number 2 receiver, and then you take your number 2 corner and a safety over the top, and you double the hell out of the number 1. I guess you can toss up who you think the number 1 is, if you think it's DK or if you think it's Lockett, but just based on matchup, I want Trey on Lockett. I think he matches up better with his footwork and hand technique and the size, and then give me our number 2 corner on DK. And I see the thoughts from Lone Wolf, Levi, Joe, Levi, and Micah. Yeah, I would assume it's Levi. I'm just kind of playing for, knock on wood, and I don't want to jinx anything, but like potential injury concerns, or if Levi's having a bad game and they swap him out, anything like that. Just whoever the number 2 corner is, I assume it's going to be Levi, especially after the snaps from last game. But whoever the number 2 corner is, most likely Levi. Put him on Metcalf, shadow him over the top with Micah Hyde. That's what I think we need to do. And I think that would really help, which is good for Micah Hyde that he was a full participant in practice today, as was Vernon Butler, as was Jerry Hughes. Matt Milano did not practice. Josh Norman did not practice. Milano's still not practicing. Ooh, he's the disruptor on the defense. Eric from Cover One has been tremendous in his film breakdown on the old Twitter and on the old YouTubes with the role that Milano plays in the defense and how he disrupts and how his role allows Tremaine Edmonds and the rest of the Bills defense to clean up. He is so explosive, and his playmaking ability that doesn't show up on the stat sheet is something that we're really missing. So the fact that Milano didn't practice today, hasn't really practiced all week. Even last week in the reps that he was getting in against the Pats, you could see that he was limited with that pec injury, whether it was the injury itself or the brace. He wasn't able to fully extend on a couple plays. He missed some tackles because of it. Milano being out scares me. The Bills defense as a whole scares me. I don't think it's any secret that the Bills defense has not played up to snuff. I have spoken at large, despite being labeled as a homer by some people on the old Twitter, which was far from the truth and a gross misconception. I haven't been happy with what the Bills defense has done this year. I still think it's too early to call whether or not they're going to be terrible, and still think it's too early to say that Tremaine Edmonds doesn't deserve his option picked up. But right now, the Bills defense are 23rd in the NFL in DVOA. They are 15th in the NFL at points per game allowed at 24.9. They've allowed 12 passing touchdowns, which is 12th in the NFL, and they've allowed a touchdown in the red zone 62.5% of the time, which is good enough for 17th in the NFL. Sorry, I got distracted by Lone Wolf's comment there. Yeah, Milano was wearing a shoulder harness during game, which limits his ability. That is correct. I just didn't know if it's a pure pain thing or pure like physical, he can't reach because of the harness, but fair to you for that point. Yeah, he is wearing that harness, and it says two things. One, that he needs it, and two, his mobility is going to be limited, whether it's due to the pain, the injury, the ability of the muscle not being healed, or due to the harness itself. The Bills' defense has been beaten in the middle of the field, both in the run game and the passing game, time and time again. And I'm very scared legitimately for this matchup because the Seahawks receivers as a whole, even David Moore, who I haven't really talked about, their third wide receiver, who picked up a knock in practice this week and was a bit limited, he's a good wide receiver 3. And Taron Johnson, our nickel corner, who has to cover somebody at some point, he has the Bills' second worst cover grade all year. And the only person who has a worse cover grade than him is Tremaine Edmonds. They've both been very bad in coverage. They've both been beaten, especially Taron Johnson. He's beaten in man, beaten in zone by a variety of receivers of shapes and sizes and route concepts. I'm nervous for the Bills' secondary versus the Seahawks wide receivers. I'm even more worried from a defensive line perspective for the Bills because we've seen quarterbacks with time beat the Bills. And no disrespect to Ryan Tannehill, even no disrespect to Patrick Mahomes or Cam Newton or even Darnold, but we got after Darnold pretty well, especially in the second half against the Jets. Seeing Russ be able to sit back there and just have all the time in the world to pick the Bills apart, that's a recipe for a loss and a recipe for failure. A big key for me, again, I think, is the way we match up with Tyler Lockett and the way we match up with DK. I really want to see appreciate Joe for you saying I like that idea. I bookmarked that statement that right there, that you like the idea of Trey on Lockett and then Levi on Metcalf with a safety over the top. I think that's our best recipe for success. The Seahawks running game is decently banged up from the running back position. Chris Carson, their number one running back, and honestly one of the best kept secrets in all of football from a real NFL perspective and from a fantasy football perspective, is most likely out again this week. Carlos Hyde, their backup, looks to also be out, so they're probably rolling with Travis Homer or DJ Dallas. Neither of those backs are tremendous, but they're also not terrible, but they don't strike fear into my heart. But they are good enough to run through gaping holes up front if the Bills' defensive front continues to get blown off the ball, which, based on their lack of acquiring a one-tech during the trade deadline, seems like it could continue to happen. Giving Russ all that time in the passing game combined with letting the Seahawks run the ball, it could be a scary mix. I hate saying it, but I could see the Seahawks running up the score in this one. Whether the Seahawks lose or we win or we lose and they win, whichever, I don't see the Seahawks really scoring less than 28 points, mid-20s, maybe even low 30s. Again, look at the one game they lost to the Cardinals on some odd things that happened in that game and some bad reads and bad plays from Russ and some great plays from the Cardinals defense and also a tremendous penalty that negated a DK Metcalf touchdown. They put up 34 points in that game. I believe they lost 37-34. In order to beat Seattle, you have to outscore Seattle or limit them in some way. I would like to see the Bills get some turnovers. I really think that coverage scheme that the Pats used to use with Revis and Talib is the key for me. And then hopefully the front four can get after it a bit, get some pressure on Russ. What also is worrisome with the front four, as we saw in the Titans game and the Chiefs game, losing contain on that edge. Russ is arguably the quarterback that you don't want to lose contain against the most in the NFL because he will scramble in a great way. Like, he's not just going to leave the pocket to leave the pocket. He'll scramble because, like, oh, okay, I can gain 30-something yards on this run. Or he'll scramble just a little bit to break your heart and hit you for like a 35-yard dagger down the field. It's an interesting mix. And the Seahawks offense has been good at a lot of things, especially getting the ball downfield and working the middle of the field. And the Bills defense has not been stout in the intermediate and the middle of the field in the passing game. And they have now not been stout up front, especially in the middle, against the running game. So it's a bit worrisome, but it's an interesting matchup. We're going to find out real quick. We saw what the Bills did against the Jets, and everybody was a little excited, and even myself. I don't care that the Jets are bad. Holding a professional football team, holding an NFL team to 4 total yards in the second half is a tremendous accomplishment. I don't care who it's against. So it got me potentially a little excited, and then the way they came out against the Pats in the first half of last week, even really the first 3.5 quarters, started to get me back a little bit. And then what happened? It was like the Pats realized, oh, you know what? We can just run it all over them. Let's just give it to Damian Harris every play and then run QB sweeps and QB powers with Cam Newton, and we can just run it down the Bills' throats. And that's what happened. And if we allow the Seahawks running game to get going, in addition to what their passing game can do, and we allow the play action to be a thing, oof, it's going to be scary. But it's going to be a great test because, again, I think we got a little too high after the Bills win against the Jets. I think we're a little too low after the Bills win against the Pats. We'll see what happens when the Bills defense comes up against arguably the best offense in the NFL with a quarterback that is the hands-down favorite MVP for the NFL right now. That's the Bills D versus Seattle O. Lone Wolf is here, comment there. Looking at our D-line, knowing we pay them more than any other team in the league, is it time to question the job Bean is doing? No. I think Bean has done a very good job building and constructing this team. The D-line has been banged up a bit. And I also think going into this year, the opting out of Starr is something that they hadn't foreseen and hadn't really thought that they needed to protect for. And Starr is someone I've been banging the drum for him for several years. I know he gets a lot of gruff and a lot of flack for not having the stats that other defensive tackles get. But you're seeing his effectiveness and his importance to the team this year with what he used to do and just stake his claim in the middle of the field, eat up blockers, and provide Milano and Edmonds and Poyer and Hyde and the other defensive linemen to also roam free a bit and not have to wade through as much traffic and take on multiple blockers. Starr was a big, important player. I would have liked to see Bean make a deal at the deadline, but I don't think it's fair to question the job Bean is doing, considering everything else that he set up, the Diggs acquisition, the other signings, and bringing together and cultivation of this team and draft picks. I don't think it's fair for that. Joe, Ed never improved like we all hope. Star may play a factor there. I think Oliver's been doing a little better than people give him credit for. He's been getting some pressures. He's got a high pass rush win rate for himself. I think he's right now forced into a role, and he's wearing a hat that he's not accustomed to wearing and not fit for. He's not fit to eat double teams and see multiple guys on the front like that. He's not built for that star role, and we've had to flex him into that a bit. We don't have somebody else that can fill that star role, which I guess you could put that on Bean a little bit, that we didn't have somebody else that could man that one tech should Star go down. But I think it's really been that impact of Star and some injuries up front and some underperforming. But if you look at some of the metrics, especially from a pass rush win rate perspective and pass rush grades, Jefferson's been having a decent enough year. Jerry Hughes has done pretty well. Oliver's been better than we think, but we haven't seen him flash in the big moments like he did last year at times. Yeah, Ed played nose in college, but I can't compare playing nose in college to playing a similar type of role in the NFL. The size is different. The technique is different. The grown men that you're playing against. Ed Oliver also, not to make it seem like he hasn't done good in the NFL, he dominated in college to the point that the year before he came out, he was talked about as like the first overall pick in the draft or a top 3 pick. I mean, even when the Bills got him, it was still said like, oh, wow, he fell and he slid, but there was talks that he was going to be a top 3 pick lock. So he was dominating and playing at a level at one point in college that was absolutely unreal. I think he can still get to that, but he's just having to wear a hat that he's not built to wear and is having to force himself to play certain roles that, again, he's not fit to play. That was the Bills D versus the Seattle O. Now we're going to get into the Bills offense versus the Seattle defense, which gives me a little hope for this game. If we beat the Seahawks, it's because we're putting up points on the defense. Because we can score, we have in the past, we have scored in the first several games of this year pretty well, and the Seahawks defense has been leaky at best. Again, we're going to start with the Seattle defense. Even though they've been terrible, their DVOA, they're 21st in DVOA for the defense. Again, the Bills were 23rd. They are 24th in the NFL in points per game with 28.4 points per game given up. They are 24th in the NFL at allowing teams in the red zone to score a touchdown 69.2% of the time. They're 14th in blitz percentage in the NFL, blitzing 29.7% of the time. They're 24th in sacks. They give up 358.7 passing yards per game, which is the worst in the NFL. They are on pace to be arguably the worst pass defense of all time in the NFL. And they give up 102.1 rushing yards per game, which is 9th in the NFL. But there are some caveats coming into this game. One, the defense still has Bobby Wagner, who is one of the best linebackers in the NFL, is a 5-time All-Pro, including being an All-Pro last year. They have KJ Wright, who's also a good linebacker in his own respect. Jamal Adams looks to be on track for this game. Oh, you have fantastic timing, Coach Chapman. Jamal Adams back, and Carlos Dunlap is the now. I'm guessing there was some kind of typo there on that back end. But yeah, Jamal Adams is back for this game. He's tied for the Seahawks lead in sacks in just the 3 games that he's played. He is a disruptor. He's a very good player. I know we don't like him, but he is what he is. He's back. And as Coach Chapman put, Carlos Dunlap should be in the fold. Defensive end the Seahawks traded for from the Cincinnati Bengals. Wasn't getting a lot of burn with the Bengals. Was on the trade block. Someone that Bills fans wanted to acquire, but his cap hit was just too much. He's going to help their defensive line. I'm interested to see what the Seahawks defense looks like with Dunlap and Adams back into the fold. We saw a bit what they looked like in the beginning of the year with Adams with the rest of the defense, but throughout that, they have not been able to get pressure with the front 4. Having Dunlap there, a good edge rushing presence, oof. I'm interested to see what that Seahawks front looks like and what that defense as a whole looks like. Again, terrible in pass coverage. Their corners have been beaten. That's one area I think we could really succeed. I don't think Seattle has anyone in their secondary that can cover Stephon Diggs. For as much as we talked about the matchup problems the Seahawks receivers are going to cause for the Bills secondary, Stephon Diggs is a massive matchup problem for the Seahawks corners. I don't think they have anybody that can stay with him. John Brown, I don't think the Seahawks have any corners that can stay with his speed downfield. Cole Beasley, I don't think the Seahawks have anybody that can cover him in the slot, on the option routes, in those jerk routes, in the middle of the field. Bobby Wagner is going to be their best bet. So there's the opportunity for points for the Bills offense to put points up on the Seahawks defense. But at the end of the day, the Seahawks defense, they're going to get reinforcements this week. And as Coach Chapman said, better know where Adams is at all times. Joe Nelson, I'll go to you because I'm already there. Any idea of the weather of this game? I think it's supposed to be really nice, like 66 degrees, sunny, like a perfect day for football and very non-Buffalo-like for a November day. I think we can take advantage of the Seahawks defense. I don't think they're as bad as the numbers indicate. The numbers are very bad. Again, they're the worst in the NFL in terms of how many passing yards per game they give up. They're not great in DVOA. They give up almost 30 points per game. But as it was mentioned there, you better know where Jamal Adams is at all times. That's very true. He plays safety very similar to the way Troy Polamalu used to play safety. He also plays safety very similar to how Budda Baker plays safety, someone who can just match up all over the field. I do think Adams is not as good in coverage as is talked about. I know we've seen some things here and there that have shown that he's had some weakness. I think he's much better around the line of scrimmage, blitzing off the edge, coming up for support in the run, covering things in the hook curls and the flats, covering tight ends. I don't think he's somebody that I traditionally fear in the middle of the field, like in the deep third, like in an Earl Thomas type of role, if we're going to compare people to old Seahawks. I think he can be beat downfield, but his playmaking ability and game-wrecking ability is something that is very real and very strong. And again, having that at each level, so you've got Jamal Adams at the safety level. I can't overstate the play of Bobby Wagner at the linebacker position. Bobby Wagner is fantastic. I don't know if everybody listening or watching catches a lot of Seahawks games. Bobby Wagner is fantastic, and he's been fantastic since he came into the league. Again, you don't get to be a 5-time All-Pro if you're not doing something right at some point. And with all the losses the Seahawks have had on defense and the injuries they've had and players they've lost in free agency and contracts and all that stuff, Bobby Wagner has been the lone guy who stayed behind it. He is elite. I don't care how bad a defense is. When you have somebody of that caliber on it, that's someone to be cautious of and be wary of. So having Jamal Adams at safety, having Bobby Wagner at linebacker, and I'm interested to see what Dunlap does to their defensive line, a defensive line that has not been good. Because what I feared for the Bills' defense against Russ is something that I think the Seahawks have to fear against the Bills, which is if they're just going to come after Josh Allen with 4, I think Allen might have a lot of time in the world to just sit back and enjoy the nice 60-something degree weather and find Diggs and find Brown and find Beasley or check down to Singletary or check down to Moss. I think he has the opportunity to pick the Seahawks apart a little bit, and that's where we're going to need to succeed against this defense. I'm also excited to see what the running game is going to be able to do now for the Bills offense. And we're going to get into some Bills offensive talk here. And just to throw out some injury thoughts after practice today, John Brown was a full participant in practice. Mitch Morse, who suffered a concussion against the Patriots, did not practice today, but he's been getting some work in this week. Cody Ford was another player who did not participate in practice. So the line's a little bit banged up. But the Bills offense, maybe not on the level that Seattle's is, but they come into this game holding their own. They're 8th in DVOA. They are 19th in the NFL at 24.8 points per game, and some of those numbers are skewed. They are 13th in the NFL with red zone touchdown percentage at 62.5. Fun fact, their red zone touchdown percentage on offense is the same as what they allow on defense at 62.5, which is interesting. It made me double check like 6 times to make sure I didn't write down the same thing twice. They're 9th in the NFL in yards per play with 5.9. Again, Seattle is first in the NFL on offense with 6.4. So an 8-spot drop, but they're only 0.5 yards per play behind the Seahawks, which are one of the best offenses in the NFL. The Bills offense is 10th in passing yards per game, 19th in rushing yards per game at 108.6. But again, they are coming off of a very strong 190-yard rushing effort against the New England Patriots. I think the Bills can run the ball against the Seahawks defense. I think they can pass the ball against the Seahawks defense. I think this is a game that the Bills can win. I apologize to whoever said it in the chat because I saw it much earlier. I saw somebody wrote the Seahawks are beatable. I think they are. Despite the fact that they're 6-1, despite the fact that the Bills have 2 wins in their last 2 weeks that were a bit lackluster, despite the fact that the Bills did not show up well against Kansas City and against the Titans, and in other areas of the game, they got eaten alive on defense against Miami, but just came away with the win. I think the Bills can win this game Seattle's defense is the biggest question mark for me right now. What do they look like with Jamal Adams? What do they look like with Carlos Dunlap? What kind of impact does Bobby Wagner have? Can you neutralize him? What do you do with KJ Wright? Those are the 4 guys I'm keeping my eye on when it comes to the Seahawks defense. And can Josh Allen go blow for blow with Russell Wilson? It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But you got Seattle coming from the West Coast all the way to the East, a defense that has not played good, and I know they get some reinforcements. But the Bills' offense is good in their own right. We mentioned the advanced metrics between Allen and Russ. Again, Russ is having an amazing year, but the advanced metrics show that they're a bit closer in some areas, and Allen is also having a good year. Allen has to tap back into that quarterback he was against the Rams, well, the first half of the game, and against the Raiders, primarily in the first half of that game as well. The quarterback against Miami, that offense has to recapture that. A healthy John Brown makes a world of difference for the Bills offense because that additional vertical threat that you always have to worry about opens up so much underneath, especially as all these defenses are now trying to play a scheme against the Bills where they just play zone and don't let anything get behind them. The defense that Tennessee played against us, and everybody started going, oh, you know what? That might work. Let's do that. Allen's going to have to eat him underneath. He's going to have to carve him up and be surgical and own that 7-yard to 15-yard mark, maybe even less. He might have to kill him at the 7 to 12, that lower intermediate. And I want to see what the run game can do. Feliciano was a tremendous boost back for the offensive line last week. I know you can say it's coincidence because of sample size. It's one game back and one good game of running the ball. But sometimes having success in the running game, sometimes it's a mentality thing. The NFL is so mental. For as much as we talk about the physical and we talk about size and strength and speed and execution, a lot of it is mental. Professional sports in general are so mental. But Feliciano getting back on that line and the fact that he shifted over to center and we were able to continue to grind it out was a really positive sign. I would like to see Mitch Morse play in this game. I think he is the straw that stirs the drink for this offensive line. He's a very, very cerebral center. And also he's been our best offensive lineman all year. The blocks that he's making and the decisions that he's making, the calls and the adjustments and the effectiveness that he has had on the offensive line is just so calming and so reassuring. If we can add Feliciano and Morse to that offensive line, I think we have an opportunity to run the ball. The Seahawks defense is one that can be beaten. I know Adams is coming back, and I know Dunlap will be in the game. I don't want to disregard those additions. And I think those additions are big. And I think the Seattle defense is better than the numbers indicate. But I still think it's one the Bills can put up 30 points on if they do what they're capable of doing. The offensive line is going to be important in this one, what Mitch Morse does, where Feliciano is. But I think it's key. And then also another fantastic comment here from Lone Wolf. If we can run the ball and control time of possession, I don't know why my brain went out when I saw TOP. Josh Allen may not have to hang with Wilson, take what the defense gives you. That's very true. We've seen teams that have tried to beat the Chiefs or the Pats when their offense was a juggernaut. Ball control, ball control, ball control. Run the ball, grind the clock, give Russell Wilson less opportunities to beat you. I think that would be fantastic. And again, with the type of defense that teams are trying to play against the Bills, which is don't get beat over the top, when the Bills are scoring, look at what they did against the Jets. I know it didn't result in touchdowns, but look what they did against the Jets. Look what they did against the Pats. Even with the Chiefs and the Titans to a degree, I know those were losses, but the Bills have been able to move the ball down the field without having to go over the top. Josh Allen has been able to go 7 yards, 4 yards, 11 yards, 8 yards, 12 yards, 6 yards. He's been able to get those mini chunk plays and move the ball down the field. If we can also do that with the run game, I think that would be tremendous. You hit it right on the head with that comment. Controlling time of possession, keeping Russ and the offense off the field. It's a recipe for success. I also really want to see that coverage scheme on defense in order to limit what Lockett and Metcalf can do. It's going to be a tough game. The Seahawks are top of the league in almost every offensive metric, like we went over in terms of raw stats, but also DVOA and DYAR. And the Bills' offense is close to them in certain metrics. Both defenses are towards the bottom end in terms of the raw stats and the advanced metrics. So we're going to see what this game has in store for us. It's an important one. We spoke about the game last week, the Pats game of if not now, when. And I don't want to say this is the most important game for the Bills, but the Seahawks are fantastic, and the Bills have lost. Well, they're fantastic offensively, and the Bills have lost some steam. They've lost a bit of that mojo. People are starting to jump off the bandwagon a little bit in terms of, oh, the Bills aren't really anything, and Josh Allen's not real, and people are throwing out all the quarterbacks under 24, and who would you take? And nobody's taking Josh Allen anymore. They're taking Burrow, and they're taking Kyler Murray. People are starting to forget about the Bills a little bit. This would be a massive, massive statement win for the Buffalo Bills. And more importantly, it would move the Bills to 7-2, which is good because the rest of the Bills' schedule is not very easy. The Steelers are looking more real by the day. I know the 49ers are banged up in a variety of ways. The Cardinals are not going to be easy. Even the Chargers aren't going to be easy. So we'll see what the Bills can do in this game. It's a big one. It's a massive statement game, one way or the other. Let's see how the Bills can hang with the best team in the NFC, with an MVP favorite. We have no chance. Let's be honest. I highly disagree. I disagree with that comment 1,000%. We definitely have a chance. Seattle's beatable, and the Bills can do it. We'll see what happens. It's going to come down to the matchups, come down to the execution. As always, I want to thank everybody for riding with me on this episode, whether you're here live, watching on YouTube, or listening later on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or also listening later on YouTube, whatever. Thank you to anyone and everyone who listens, who watches, who engages, who supports. Thank you to everybody in the chat, especially Lone Wolf and Joe Nelson and Coach Chapman, the guys who are constantly posting and keeping everything fun and active in there and presenting good conversation and things for me to engage with as well. Thank you very much for anything and everything and all the support. Give me a follow on Twitter. Again, it's pro__ant, pro 2_ ANT. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, all that stuff. Subscribe to Cover One in all the same areas. I hope you and all of your family and friends and loved ones are staying safe through the horrible year that 2020 is. Exactly. Good times, Lone Wolf. Good times. Thank you very much to all you guys. And hopefully I'll see you next week after a Bills win against the Seahawks. But either way, I'll see you next week.